My whole life was there. I ain't done nothing to nobody.
Over the decades, Walt Butler has become a figurehead in Altadena. The former track star is known for his support of local youth, but now his home and his classic car collection are gone.
It's not fair. It's not fair. I'm sorry, but it's not fair.
That's absolutely heartbreaking, sad, sort of ridiculous in a way when you realize it wasn't even his fault. Yes, things happen. But the question is, why did this happen? You see, that is what the story looks like beyond the headlines that you see on TV every day. A man who spent decades building a life in Altadena lost his home, his memories, his classic car collection in a single night. For more than a year, people like him have been waiting for an official explanation, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Now, apparently they finally have one.
We begin with breaking news. The Los Angeles County Fire Department says it has determined the cause of the deadly Eaton Fire. After an 18-month investigation, officials say the fire was sparked by electrical arcing from an out-of-service Southern California Edison transmission tower. The Eaton Fire killed 19 people and destroyed or damaged more than 9,000 homes and businesses. LA County's Fire Investigative Unit jointly conducted the investigation with CAL FIRE. The district attorney is still reviewing the case.
So, after an 18-month investigation, Los Angeles County Fire and CAL FIRE have concluded that electrical arcing from an out-of-service Southern California transmission tower ignited the Eaton Fire. 19 people were killed. More than 9,000 homes and businesses were destroyed or damaged. And investigators are now saying the fire began when electrical activity from equipment described as out of service sent hot metal into the dry vegetation below. That conclusion gives the public somewhat of an answer, but it also opens the door to a much larger set of questions. How did supposedly inactive equipment become energized? Could the ignition have been prevented? Who was responsible for monitoring that tower? And why did residents have to wait a year and a half for confirmation of something that attorneys and witnesses were pointing towards almost immediately? See, these are the questions, and I don't think that enough people are asking these questions. Listen, if you don't care, they don't care. If you don't care, then they've done their job, because nothing will ever happen. And a year and a half later, the people who were not affected are not paying attention anymore. Yeah, they'll watch the news, they'll read the headline, they'll say, oh, that's messed up. But there's no emotional attachment to it anymore. This is the problem.
That's attorney Doug Boxer, and he, along with the group LA Fire Justice, put together this 3D model of Altadena. It's using surveillance footage and witness testimony, and they say it pinpoints the Eaton Fire's origin. How confident are you that Edison started this?
So in the years I've been doing this, along with my litigating partner, this evidence is pretty clear-cut.
It's funny because you have to realize that even if the attorney is able to prove it, there's no real guarantee that the people who lost their homes, their businesses, the families that lost their loved ones will ever be compensated. And the reason for that is because these people are hardly ever truly held accountable for anything. Matter of fact, when you dig a little bit deeper, you'll find that there's been protections created for these companies so that if something like this were to happen, they get off scot-free. Now, that statement came before investigators released their final conclusion. At the time, attorneys representing fire victims said that they had assembled surveillance footage, witness testimony, and a three-dimensional model of the area to identify where the flames began. They were not simply guessing based on where the fire spread. They were reconstructing the entire scene. They were comparing camera angles. They were reviewing what residents saw during the first moments of the disaster. And they believe the evidence led directly towards Edison's transmission equipment. Now, attorneys obviously represent their clients, and their claims still have to be tested through the legal system, but the official investigation has now arrived at a conclusion that points toward the same general source. That changes the conversation. The central question is no longer whether people notice unusual activity near the tower. No. The issue now is what happened to that equipment? Why did it happen? And did anyone have the opportunity to stop it? And for those who like conspiracy, was there anything nefarious connected to all of this?
Attorney Jay Adelson releasing this video last week, showing an apparent spark at a transmission tower right before fire spread.
It's funny how we're just kind of seeing this footage. Now, some of you may have already seen this footage, but how do you roll it out so slowly so they can make sure they get it all right? Not necessarily that they get the facts right per se, but they want to make sure that they can narrate it right. Footage like this is very, very, very important because wildfires, as we know, can become enormous within minutes. Once a hillside is burning, the original ignition point can be extremely difficult to separate from everything that follows, but a recording captured before the flames expand can help establish a timeline. What happened first? Where did the initial light appear? What direction did the fire move? What equipment was located at that exact area? That is why residents and attorneys focus so heavily on this tower. The video did not resolve every technical or legal question by itself, but it did, however, provide investigators with something concrete to examine. And now the country's first final report says electrical arcing from the tower caused the hot material to fall into the vegetation underneath it. That means the early footage was not merely an internet theory circulating after a tragedy. It appears to have captured a critical part of the event investigators were trying to understand.
It's now official. The Eaton Fire was caused by electrical equipment. LA County Fire and CAL FIRE investigators have made their investigation findings public, and it's what many have suspected for more than a year, that an idle or unused power line that was strung alongside live lines was briefly energized in the high winds on the night of January 7th, 2025, and that caused sparks to fall right under a Southern California Edison tower on a hill above Altadena. The report says ejected hot metal particles fell into the fuel below. That's what caused the Eaton fire.
This is the part that deserves very, very careful attention. The line involved was described as idle or unused, but according to the report, it was positioned alongside energized lines and became briefly energized during the high winds. That produced what they call electrical arcing. The arcing then released hot metal particles into the dry fuel underneath the tower. Once those particles reached vegetation, apparently the fire began. So when people hear the phrase out of service, they may naturally assume the equipment posed no immediate danger, but inactive does not necessarily mean physically removed. It doesn't mean that the line was separated from every possible electrical interaction. And apparently, it did not mean the surrounding area was safe from ignition. That distinction will likely become one of the most important parts of the investigation going forward. Was it a known risk? Had similar arcing happened before? Were there procedures for inspecting unused lines positioned near active equipment? And most importantly, were those procedures followed? Because equipment does not have to be performing its original function to become dangerous. Sometimes the danger comes from infrastructure that remains in place long after people assume it's harmless.
Questions why that transmission tower wasn't powered off despite the National Weather Service issuing strong wind warnings in the area. SoCal Edison's CEO recently telling the LA Times that the winds that day were not strong enough to trigger a de-energization at that particular transmission.
This may be one of the most contested decisions in the entire case. The National Weather Service had issued strong wind warnings for the area. Attorneys for the victims argued that that transmission system should have been de-energized before conditions became catastrophic. Edison's position, according to the earlier report, was that the wind speeds at that location did not meet the threshold required to shut down that particular transmission line. That leaves us with a policy question that goes beyond one company or one fire. Are the current shutdown thresholds adequate for Southern California's increasingly dangerous fire conditions? Listen, a system can follow its written standard and still produce a disastrous outcome. That does not automatically prove negligence, but it does mean the standard itself deserves scrutiny. If the threshold says equipment can remain energized, but the equipment later arcs and helps ignite a deadly wildfire, officials cannot simply point toward the existing rule and end the discussion. They have to determine whether the rule protected the public. If it didn't, then something has to change before the next wind event.
A spokesperson says the governor has issued 28 executive orders to support wildfire recovery and accelerate rebuilding efforts, moving at a pace nearly 3 times faster than when permits were issued during the 5 years before the Palisades and Eaton fires erupted.
The department's arson fire unit conducted the investigation with CAL FIRE for 18 months before releasing this report. The LA County Fire Department says they remain committed to transparency and fully support independent investigations and after-action reviews. A spokesperson with SoCal Edison did respond to our request and to the findings. They say, in part, quote, "We received the LA County Fire report and are reviewing it. We have taken our potential role in the start of the fire seriously from the beginning. As we previously said, SCE believes that it is likely that its equipment was associated with the ignition of the Eaton fire."
You know, that wording is worth examining. Edison says that it's taken its potential role in all of this seriously and believes that its equipment was likely associated with the ignition. I guess you could say that's a significant acknowledgement. At the same time, saying equipment was associated with an event is not necessarily the same as accepting full legal responsibility for everything that followed. The company is reviewing the county's report. The district attorney is reviewing the case. Civil lawsuits are moving forward, and each side will examine the technical evidence, operating procedures, weather conditions, and decisions made before the fire started. We should allow that process to unfold, but residents should not be expected to accept vague language forever. Residents should and deserve plain answers. What exactly became energized? Was the danger foreseeable? Could the line have been removed, isolated, or shut down? Who knew about the condition of the tower? And what protections are being put in place now? Accountability is not simply about issuing a statement after investigators release their findings. Accountability is about showing the public how the same sequence of events will be prevented from ever happening again.
Residents here just want answers. I asked one neighbor who lost everything how important it would be for him to get closure on the fire's cause.
Well, it's critical. I think anytime we're going to look back at this decades into the future, and I never will feel that it will ever be the same.
That may be the most honest statement in this entire story. Altadena will be rebuilt in some form. New houses may eventually stand where burned structures remain today. Insurance claims will be processed, lawsuits may be settled, officials will issue reports and hold meetings, but rebuilding structures is not the same as restoring a community exactly as it existed. Some families lost relatives. Other folks, they lost homes that have been passed down through generations. People lost photographs, they lost their heirlooms, businesses, folks lost their cars, and pieces of their personal history that cannot be replaced by a check. That is why determining the cause matters. It's not about satisfying curiosity. It's about establishing responsibility. It's about improving safety. It's about giving survivors some measure of truth about why their lives changed. Closure may never fully come, but uncertainty should not be added to the burden they already carry. After 18 months, the official conclusion is now finally public. Investigators say electrical arcing from an out-of-service Southern California Edison transmission tower sent hot metal into vegetation and ignited the Eaton Fire. That finding answers the first question. It does not answer the rest. Why was that equipment capable of becoming energized? Were warning signs missed? Were shutdown standards too weak? Could a different decision have been made to prevent the fire? And who will ultimately bear the cost of rebuilding Altadena? Those questions now belong to investigators, courts, regulators, Edison, and the public, because this cannot end with a carefully written report followed by business as usual. No. 19 people died. Thousands of property were damaged or completely destroyed. An entire community was permanently changed. The people of Altadena deserve more than condolences. They deserve transparency. They deserve meaningful safety reforms. And if the evidence shows this disaster could have been prevented, they deserve accountability. And you know what I mean. I'm Wolf Kage, and this is Wolf Kage Los Angeles. And around here, we need to continue asking questions that other people would rather leave unanswered. Peace.